Welcome to our webinar. This is Kim Bussey. I am your Key Relationship Manager here with Omnia, and we are so excited that you've joined us for our first series of our monthly Lunch and Learns. If this is your first time, welcome. If you are a returning guest, then Happy New Year. We're so glad that you're back with us. Real quick, couple of housekeeping things. There is an icon at the top of a person hand raised. Raise your hand if you can hear me okay. If I say anything that you agree or disagree with, you can select that. If you need me to speak a little louder or speak a little softer, you can let me know. Or if I'm going to need to speed up a little bit or slow down, let me know that. As well as since I can't hear you, laughter and applause is always welcome. You can give that to me as well. This is going to be interactive. So if you're thinking you're sitting here on your Lunch and Learn webinar and it's going to be one of those want webinars, you are in for a surprise. We have so many best practices and businesses with us, and we want you to help share your expertise. So as I ask these questions, go ahead. We're going to have some interactive polls, some ideas, as well as if you have any comments or questions, go ahead and type them in the chat box. We will have a Q&A session at the end, but also don't feel like you have to wait. You can also download our presentation as well. So if you're going to try to frantically take notes as I'm talking, it's okay. Sit back, listen, enjoy, because you can download this. So let's start off with talking about what that toxic environment is and really what starts it. So I want you to take a moment and think of one word, yes, only one word that you would use to describe a toxic environment. Maybe it's that negativity, maybe it's backbiting. Go ahead and type it in the top up here for me. Thank you. So we see contentious, dysfunctional. What are some other things that we're seeing? Type them in the top for me. So I see gossip, absolutely. As you're typing in your information, just want to let you know that this series is being recorded. If you don't follow us on our social media, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, follow us. You'll get those notifications, and you can also take a listen to the webinars as well. So I'm seeing overwhelmingly that we've got mentally unhealthy, disrespectful, stressful, entitlement. But it seems like there is a large number that keeps coming back to that negativity. Negative in some way, form, or fashion, whether it's negativity. I love this. Karen shares it's vampires and poisonous. Absolutely. All of those are right there. And Sarah says it's uncomfortable. When we think about it, the number one thing that leads into that toxic environment is negativity. And from that foundation, it begins to grow that stress and that awkwardness and that competitiveness, that dysfunction. What we're going to focus a lot on today is the factors that create that toxic environment. And what you can do as a leader to either stop it before it becomes toxic, or if you happen to be in a toxic environment, let me tell you, there is hope that you can transform it into that terrific environment. We're going to give you some tips and tools to do that, as well as really recognizing what some of those most common factors, those negativity carriers in your organization. Because let's face it, negativity is that first sign of toxicity. We know it brings us down, but sometimes as leaders, we don't really know how to handle it. So most of us go, shh, I'm hiding from negative people. We think if we can get away from it, it's going to go away. And for many of our team members, if they're not in a leadership role, they have that opportunity. However, as leaders, we don't have that option to hide. We have to be those doctors that diagnoses the symptoms, write that prescription to heal the disease of negativity, and work to inoculate the rest of our team to prevent the spread. But before we can do it, let's really define what negativity is. The dictionary defines negativity as the expression of criticism or pessimism. The expression. I don't like that restaurant. It burned my food. We've got to go there again. But when we correlate it into the workplace, into workplace negativity, it changes a little bit. It goes from the expression of criticism or pessimism to a habit of criticism or pessimism that affects productivity and profitability. Let's face it, if I asked you to raise your hands and said, how many of you have ever been negative at one point in your life, every one of us would have to raise our hands. And if we didn't raise our hands, then we're probably forgetting that one time, even as a kid, that we stomped our foot and said, I don't want to eat that. I don't like rice anymore. We've all been negative. And that's okay. Sometimes the situation calls for negativity, and we can express that in a healthy manner. But when workplace negativity starts to become ingrained, it goes from an expression to that habit. Now I'm going to not like anything. I'm going to be negative about the way the walls are painted and how Joe sips his coffee and how we never, ever are recognized for any of our work. The cost of that habit of criticism, the habit of really looking at the bad side of things, creates that environment of toxicity. And when it begins to infect those around us, it affects our productivity and profitability. Let's face it, unhappy people are usually not productive people. They spend more of their mental energy, more of their time discussing why things are wrong than how they can create opportunities. And as that negativity spreads, then it becomes more of a hard cost. Let's think about it. We know negativity is like, yeah, people are complaining, but then it begins to affect other areas. Deadlines are missed. Time is lost because I just don't want to go into work today. Raise your hands if you've ever had that day where you woke up and go, I don't want to go to work. I don't want to adult today. If we look at it, it's usually because of something that's going on in the workplace. We have that feeling that, I just don't want to be there. Our tardiness, now we're dragging our feet, and that causes attendance issues. Are negative people going to give the best customer service? Probably not. And then you have employee turnover because people have options, especially your top performers. I don't have to work in an environment where I'm unhappy and unproductive because I know I can go somewhere else. And typically, those people that are creating your toxic environment are not going to be the ones that leave. They're going to drive your other key performers in your organization away. As a leader, we have to start recognizing the hard cost of it. Think of it this way. If the average employee spends about 2.5 hours per week on negativity, that's an average of about 3 weeks per year of paid time wasted in negativity. If the employee makes $10 an hour, that's almost $1,300 a year that you're paying your employees to be negative. Now, multiply that by the number of employees that you have or that you manage within your department, and the cost of negativity can grow into the thousands. The Bureau of Labor and Statistics estimate that about $3 billion per year is lost to workplace negativity. The question you want to ask yourself is, can your company afford to allow negativity to bloom into a toxic environment? Probably not. I know here at Omnia, no way, no how can we do that. So really what starts that negativity? Well, it starts with your people. We are all made up of different behavioral traits, different needs to be successful. Think about your teams. We all come in with diversity and work experience and life experience. And we all have those little quirks and habits that can either make a really great team or it can cause us to go not so well. Think of this. If your company has salespeople, what are some of those traits that the most successful salespeople have? And if you don't have salespeople, then think about that. Whether it's a producer, what are some of those traits that the most successful salespeople have? And as you're typing that, okay, so I'm seeing people skills. Maybe you're like, I deal more with service. That's fine. Go ahead and type in the box to the upper right. What are some of those traits that the most successful service people here? So I'm seeing a lot of tenacity for salespeople, persuasion, optimism, thick skin. They're positive, they're driven, they're dedicated, they're self-starters, great communication skills, listening skills, drive, persistence, self-starters, confidence. These are all very active roles. Most successful salespeople are those assertive people that are going to go out. They know what they want. They know what they need to get. They're thick-skinned. So, hey, if I hear no, it just means not yet. But let's look at some of those traits that the successful service people have. Well, I'm seeing things like dedicated and caring and patience. They go beyond expected. They're supportive. They're detail-oriented. They're engaged, they're organized, they're compassionate, they're detail-oriented. Are we seeing some differences between salespeople and service people? One has that drive and that thick skin to go out and make things happen. Most successful service people are those supportive, detail-oriented, let's work together to achieve the goal. Are both necessary to be successful in a company? Absolutely. But those very differences between your salespeople, your producers, and your service team is going to cause some conflict. And when conflict happens, it begins to cause some negativity. And when negativity happens, it begins to cause that toxic environment. People begin to focus more on their differences than how they come together and work as a team. Think of it this way. Rocks are eroded by drops of water. Usually, it takes a long period of time. Most of toxic environments in the workplace do not happen overnight, but they happen just like those drops of water. The differences that make that amazing team can also begin to start to erode the heart of the team. Things like different cultures or a different need for structure. Your salespeople tend to fly by the seat of their pants sometimes. Their structure is let me do what it takes to get the sale. Your service people are more along the lines of no, we have guidelines. We have to follow them. You are not following the guidelines. It begins to cause that negativity of I don't know why they can't just do what I ask them to do because I got the sale. They need to finish it up. I don't know why they can't understand that we need 5 sets of initials and a signature. I've only told them 1,000 times. Maybe it's a difference in work ethic. And that's something that's hard to measure, but we all know it when we see it. It's not necessarily that person that's going to put in 60, 70, 80 hours a week, but it's that person who's there and who cares about their position and they care about what they do and they want to make it the best and they're going to work as hard as they can for that time frame that they're there. There's diversity in values. Some of our values are different. Going back to the differences between sales and service, sales values is let me make the money. The service team values typically are like, let me help somebody. Neither are good or bad. It's understanding that as a leader that's going to allow you to start to understand your people and how they behave and how you can coach it. Even something as simple as the pace, someone who says, hey, I can multitask and I'm going to constantly change directions can cause someone to stress out. And over time, that's going to go into negativity. And it starts off with something small. Hey, Sarah didn't do what I asked her to do. Okay, well, then it'll come back. Well, it'll come back. And then now Sarah could say, hey, I won the Powerball last night. Here's $1,000,000. And I'd be like, what's the catch? Because it changes my attitude and my perspective towards Sarah. That's when you have a toxic environment. And that's when, as a leader, you have to recognize the symptoms before they happen. And those symptoms show in 3 different ways. They show up verbally, they show vocally, and they show visually. Now, verbally and vocally, you're probably thinking, okay, really, what's the difference there, Kim? Verbally is what we say. No, I'm not going to do it. Sarah always gets on my nerves. Why did Dan do it that way? He's changed directions again. Vocally is how we say it. Yeah, sure, great job, Kim. Does it sound like I really think that Kim did a great job? No, not really. The vocally is the tone, the volume, the pitch, the expression in your voice. And we hear that a lot over the phone or that face to face. Now, visually is where those nonverbal skills come in. Maybe it's the eye rolling and the arms crossed, or you're in a meeting and someone says something and someone very casually pushes away from the table. Or some of those symptoms could be shown visually, as in the door is always closed, earbuds are in. Maybe someone comes in exactly at 9 a.m. and they are ready to leave exactly at 5 p.m. The person that tended to go out and hang out with people or from work are now like, nope, not going to deal with it. I'm going to take a step back. As the leader, you have to recognize these symptoms. And then the next thing that you have to ask yourself is, how do you handle conflict? As the leader, you drive your environment. If you're not prepared to confront those negativity carriers, or if you're not prepared to deal with some of the hard issues, it's going to be tough. But maybe your idea of conflict is la 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 la. If I ignore it, it will go away. I don't see it, so therefore it is not. Or maybe you're that person that says, oh, I see an issue and we're going to deal with it right away. Both of those leadership styles can bring its own set of toxicity to your company. John Maxwell has this law of the lead. He's a great leadership development author and speaker. And when he speaks about the law of the lead, he always talks about how, as a leader, your team will never go above what you do. So if you lead at a level of an 8, your team will always be at least a 7 or below. They will never lead past you. The same thing happens when it comes to conflict. Conflict contributes to negativity. Negativity begins to create that toxic environment. I'm not saying that we need to have those come to Jesus meetings every week and say, okay, let's air everything out. But you have to understand that there's a fine balance of ignoring a problem and hoping it goes away and addressing it too quickly. The same law of the lead by John Maxwell applies to leading through conflict. If you're constantly avoiding it and your conflict resolution, and conflict could be as simple as, I noticed that there's been some changes and you've had some questions about this new policy. Can we talk about it? So it's not necessarily you're coming in late, let's deal with an issue. It's bringing up those hard conversations that you may not want to know the answer to. As a leader, you have to have it. You have to understand it. And regardless of your leadership style, you have to know your strengths and challenges and what are you doing to create a terrific environment. Are you avoiding that conflict? Are you talking about it? Are you facilitating it? Are you giving the big picture? Are you creating an environment with such high goals that need to happen so quickly that you're stressing your team out? If you don't know what your leadership style is, don't worry. Omnia can help you out with that. We have a great leadership report, and then we'll give you some action plans. But first, you have to know who you are. And then if you don't have the skills to facilitate through the conflict, how can you expect your team to want to navigate through it or navigate it through yourself? What you need to know is, how am I leading it? How am I possibly responsible for creating this toxic environment? So real quick poll, true or false? No one knows when I don't like an employee. And true or false? You should always give your top performers what they want. Art is also, it depends on what they want. So I have, we have about a 50-50 split here going on when no one knows when I don't like an employee. Going back and forth, true, false, true, false. I will let you know. People know. No matter how well you think you hide it, as a leader, the employee will feel it or the others will feel it. And if you have those people that are close to you that you confide to and they know that you don't like it, then that could affect their perspective of the employee. The other thing that could affect the perspective of the employee that you may or may not like is, why don't you like them? Is it something personal? Is it part of that relational conflict that we're going to talk about in a few moments? Is it their work ethic? Is it something that you can pinpoint and say, you're not doing this? So is it truly that you don't like the employee or you don't like their behaviors that they're exhibiting in their work performance? Are you talking with them? When are you talking with them? Remember, if you're that person who's like, bring it on, you may not want to address issues in the moment of emotion. And second question, you should always give your top performers what they want. True, false, or it depends on what they want. We've got about 57% that says it depends on what they want. It does depend on what they want. What you can't allow your top performers to have is a feeling of entitlement. You can't do without me because I generate the most revenue. And therefore, if I leave, my clients lead with me. That becomes an area of tyranny. It begins to create a toxic environment because, let's face it, power goes to people's head, whether they intend to it or not. So as a leader, you have to understand this is what we can't always give top performers. You have to be willing to take a risk that they may leave. And if they leave, it's okay. Have an action plan, have a backup plan. What are you doing to develop your employees? Employee development and those conversations are key to creating that terrific environment as well. Here are some other ways that as a leader, you can be unintentionally creating some of that toxic environment. There's a lack of clarity. People don't know who the leader is, what's the vision, why are we heading there, and how do we reach our goal? Maybe you're creating an environment of ambiguity. Say what you mean and mean what you say. Think of it this way. Trust is like a bank account. When we say what we mean and then we do it, we're making deposits into that bank account. We're going to make mistakes. We're human. And as leaders, we're going to make more mistakes and more recognizable mistakes than others. And when we make those mistakes, maybe we say something and forget about it. Now that's going to take a withdrawal from the trust account. Your goal is to always have more money, more trust in your trust account than less, so that when you do have those withdrawals and that you recover from them, you're not overdrawing. Because when you operate in a bank account that's consistently overdrawn, what happens? The bank closes it and they say, okay, you're done, move on. And it goes against your credit. Same thing in an environment as a leader, you continue to overdraw your trust account with your employees or with other leader peers, and they're going to say, okay, I'm done dealing with you. I can't work with you because you're not giving me what I need. The other thing that leaders can do that will create this negative environment is poor communication. Rumors abound when there's a lack of communication. And sometimes there are things that's going on that we truly can't talk about. Maybe you're a mid-level manager and you don't know everything. How you communicate that is as important as what you communicate. So we're going to 45-hour work weeks. I don't know why we're going to that, but here we are. Just do it. Does that show buy-in and camaraderie? Or no, it's showing that you don't care either, and why should your employees care? Sometimes it's as simple as saying, I'm not quite sure what's going on at this moment, but this is the direction that we're taking. As I get more information, I'm going to share it with you. The other way that leaders can show negativity that will create that toxic environment is stress. Never let them see you sweat. We can't let that stress show. And your stress may come across as being very impatient. Calm it down. Let's make sure that we understand what's going on. Now, we've talked about how leaders can create that toxic environment, but let's talk about some other conflicts that may arise that can cause some toxic environments in your team. So number one, most common and the hardest to navigate is that relational conflict. We tend to expect everyone to be adults and get along, right? That's not always the case. Hey, with relational conflict, personality differences. We're in different works of life. That's okay. We can't allow it to go into our workplace. So relational conflict, some of those causes are just personality differences. We just don't get along. We don't click. It's typically not work related, but it can build gradually. As it builds gradually, however, it breeds negativity very, very quickly. And there are two types of people, two types of those negativity carriers that will create relation conflict immediately. You've got the steamroller. This is the person that's aggressive, the bully. They can seem like a dictator. They give you their opinion regardless of the situation, regardless of whether or not you want it. They're going to tell you about it. And they're going to tell everybody else in the office. And when it comes to disagreement, they're going to show it verbally, they're going to show it vocally, and they're going to show it visually. Think of that top performer who wants their way. Think of that person who's been with your company for 20 plus years. I've seen people like you come and go. I'm here. I'm going to remain here. This is the way it's always been, and this is the way it's always going to be. You have to really coach them and be willing to take a stand privately. The worst thing that we can do to anyone is to call out their behaviors in front of a group. However, you can create some practices that's going to minimize their information. The other person, that negativity carrier, is that person who is the resistor. They don't like change or conflict. Everyone else is like, absolutely love it. And they're thinking, nope, there's no way I'm doing that. You can tell me. I may even smile and nod at you. But guess what? Not happening. Not today. Not by me. As the leader, as you start seeing that conflict, you want to make sure you facilitate, don't dictate. You don't want to be the steamroller. Set expectations that are applied consistently across the board, regardless of whether or not someone is a top producer or the person who's joined your company and it's their second day on the work. You want to create an environment of consensus. What I mean by that is you want your team to feel that they can offer their opinions in a safe environment, whether it's privately behind closed doors with you or in a team meeting. However, You have to be willing to lead through it. Just because one voice is louder than any other voice doesn't mean that they are the right voice. And what we tend to see and what we measure at Omnia is those behavioral traits. There are people who have great ideas, but they process them, and they're only going to speak up when they feel comfortable speaking up. You've got to create an environment where everyone has a voice. If there's conflict between two employees, you can't take sides. You have to listen to them. You can't automatically say, well, Kim gets what she wants. When you generate $1 million in revenue, then we'll talk. Recognize those behaviors and then set a time frame of when you expect those behaviors to change. If you have that steamroller, have that conversation with them and let them know, I expect some changes in the next meeting. I want you to be the last voice that speaks up and not the first voice. And then you want to assist your peers in recognizing the strength of peers. As we begin to become more and more negative, we begin to focus on that negativity. One of the exercises that we offer is real quick, is you have your team members sit down and you say, right, one thing that the person did that does very well, one thing that you have a challenge with, and then encourage those two peers to talk with each other. Why do we focus positive? When we begin to think of positive, we think of solutions. We think of ways that we can work together. It begins to break that negativity cycle. When you have that challenge and you begin to talk about it together, you begin to generate self-awareness. What works with one peer may not be as effective with another peer. Once again, it's not that it's right or wrong, but it's understanding that. You may also find that some of that resistor behavior is situational and not who they are permanently. They don't understand the change in processes. They have a new job or they've received a new manager and they're struggling with that transition. By encouraging that discussion, by setting those expectations and creating an environment of consensus, you're allowing them to talk about it. You're allowing them to understand it. And that leads us to the third area that can cause negativity and create that toxic environment, which is organizational conflict. It's conflicting core values, it's change, it's task, it's processes. Why is all that creating organizational conflict? Why would that create a negative environment? By a show of hands, if you've ever worked for a company that has changed ownership or you've worked in a department that's changed leadership that was completely different from previous leadership and ownership, raise your hand. Let me just see if you've ever been a part of it. So you can't see that, but I see, hands popping up all over on my side. That's great if there's been a change and those core values align, those common values align. But when you're working for a company and it completely changes, there's going to create some conflict and some negativity. Prior to coming to Omnia, I worked for a bank. We had a small community bank, 22 years, Florida based, loved it, did a lot in the community, and we were bought out by a larger bank. It was an FDIC assisted transaction. And so this national, actually a Canadian based bank who's was in the Northeast came and bought us. Well, there was stress immediately because with FDIC assisted transactions, what happens is at 5 o'clock on a Friday, someone from the government walks in and says, your bank has been closed. And now these are your new owners. There's no discussion. There's no, let's get to know you. There's none of the information that you typically have when you're beginning to look for a job. Think about that. As an outside candidate, you have a choice. You begin to research the company, you interview them, you find out if you've got those common values. When it's something like a FDIC assisted transaction, or maybe it's a merger and acquisition, and then all of a sudden, like, boom, here are your new owners. there's that stress, there's that organizational conflict, there's that negativity of, oh no, what are we going to do? You have to determine over time, does that align? Now, what helps with that determination? What inspires that loyalty in employees? Is it that company vision? Maybe you say, yeah, I love the company vision. Maybe it's the supervisor. For me, what got me through my FDIC assisted transaction in that period was my supervisor. Amazing woman, made sure that we were great. Maybe it's the peers, the company that you work for, or money. Maybe it's none of those. But think about the best job you've ever had. And in the box in the middle of the right-hand side, type in what made it the best. Was it money? I'm not seeing that. I'm seeing team members. I'm seeing leadership. I'm seeing manager. I'm seeing communication and leadership. I'm seeing the work environment. I'm seeing coworkers, respect from the owner, people I work with. And the answers that I've gotten, I haven't seen the amount of money that I earned. I'm not seeing benefits that I received. It's all about the people, the respect, the fit all around. There wasn't micromanaging. They recognized who you were as a person and allowed you to do what you did. You inspired the loyalty in your employees. You set the tone for your environment. And it's not always going to be easy. It's going to be difficult, but you can do it even through organizational conflict. Because I like what Dan says is that the company vision aligned with core values that I agree with. Who we are internally is going to determine where we're going to be happy. So if there's conflicting core values, it's going to automatically lead to disengagement or turnover. How do you as a leader coach through it? Really determine, is it true conflicting common values? Or is it a fear of change? This is something new. I don't know if I'm going to be as successful. I have to reprove myself to these people. As a leader, help your team focus on their positives, on their strengths, how that you work together as a group to support each other. Some of that organizational conflict comes from task. I don't like to do this. You do it. And we can't always restructure departments so that people only do what they like to do. I wish we could, but that's not realistic. For those people who don't like attention to detail, every job requires some paperwork. Get used to it. Maybe it's processes. Why do we do it this way? If you've ever been part of a merger or acquisition, this is huge. If you are the acquiring company, what we tend to hear is, we've never done it this way, and we bought company XYZ. They should be doing it our way. Well, we know that senior leadership is looking at it going, what's the best way? Whether it's yours, mine, or ours, what's the best way of doing it? Or it's been the same way for 10 years and now all of a sudden we're changing it. It's going to cause some difficulty for people. Leading them through that process is going to be important. This is why we do it. Help them re-internalize. Help them know that, yes, you may be struggling with that process and your productivity is declined, but we're going to set some expectations. We're going to give some additional training to help you get through it. During this organizational change, the biggest negativity carrier that you're going to encounter may be the blame shifter. That person of, I didn't know how to do it. You didn't tell me you wanted it done that way. That's not the way we've always done it. That isn't going to work. Well, I did my part, but she didn't do her part. Or she didn't do her part, so I couldn't do my part. None of it is their fault. Well, guess what? We can't shift the blame. And while some of those reasons may have some truth to them, and you may have to address, Sherry, you didn't meet the deadline, and therefore Dan couldn't complete his portion of it. You have to go back to that blame shifter and you have to hold them accountable to stop that negativity towards other people and also towards from other people towards them. What could you have done differently? Ask Sherry for the work. Follow up with them. Not micromanage, but follow up with them. The other negativity carrier that you're going to encounter could be the flat out, nope, I'm not doing it and you can't make me. And that non-compliance could be flat out defiance. I'm just not doing it. Or the, yeah, I'll take care of it. And inside their head, they're going, when it's snowing in June in Florida. You have to understand how to recognize, is it situational or is this person truly flat out saying, I'm not going to do it? Dig deeper. And we tend to get caught up in the emotions. If someone says, I'm not going to do it and you can't make me, that's it. Then if I can't make you do it, then you're not going to be on my team. You're transferring out of here. You're gone. Woo. For me, I'm kind of like, oh no, watch me. And then it becomes a battle of the wills. And when there's that battle going on, negativity grows. And when negativity grows, the toxic fumes rise. You have to recognize, is that person being non-compliant out of fear? And if they are, what can you do to alleviate those fears? What are those natural behaviors that you can look for? Have a discussion. Find out the source of the issue. Once you know it, coach them. You have to create that action plan. State their expectation, and it has to be consistent and continuous. You can't say, I noticed that you didn't complete this task. Nope, not going to do it. We have a choice at that moment. Okay, I'll get Susie to do it and back down, which now creates an environment of, well, if he doesn't have to do it, why do I have to do it? Or we can stand firm and say, oh, yes, you are, or I'm going to fire you. There's a middle ground. One, take a step back when emotions are a little bit calmer. Find out why they said they weren't going to do it. State your expectation and give them an idea of when you want it done, a clear idea. And then follow up on it. If you give someone who's not performing, who's non-compliant, a 30-day action plan and you don't follow up until day 31, or even worse, you never follow up until 6 months later when it comes to your attention again, they're not going to listen. And it creates and allows your team to know, well, Dan's the man. He doesn't have to do it. Why do I have to do it? Or he always gets his way, or I can't deal with it anymore. He's gloating about not having to do it, so I'm out of here. Are you willing to sacrifice a top performer for the good of your team? And the answer should always be yes. You want to coach them, you want to help them, but if there's straight out not going to do it, there's no improvement, then you have to be willing to say, I'm going to let you go. You have to be willing to coach all of these negativity carriers through it so that you can move forward as a team. And as part of that, you have to document. You want to document those improvements as well as any setbacks and next steps. Why improvements? Well, it may be baby steps, but it's something that you're willing to continue to coach them through. Maybe there's a large setback, but you know why it was a setback. You've had that discussion. There was a situation with it. Someone just completely forgot. And let's face it, it takes at least 30 days for a habit to form. If someone's been a steamroller for 5 years, you can't expect them to not be a steamroller after one conversation. But give them the next steps. Maybe it's saying, okay, we noticed, Mike, that this is what you did. Let's talk about what triggered it. Let's talk about next steps. Let's talk about how to prevent it in the future. Documenting it all allows you to have that clear, unbiased picture and perspective of what next steps to take. Because there's always that danger that you have the ultimate negativity carrier of the pessimist. This is the person who's just not happy. They're never going to be happy. The world's unpleasant. I'm unhappy, and I'm going to do everything possible to make it unpleasant for everyone else. They are the ultimate negativity carrier, and they are the biggest poison to your environment. They don't want to change. They don't need to change. They don't care to change. Ask yourself, does this team member have the same loyalty to me as a leader, to our team and our company, or is it all about getting their way? And I'm not saying everybody is Susie Sunshine. Some people are not. Some people are more of that very analytical, very factual person. They're not going to come in every day, you know, singing and saying hello and laughing. That's okay. It's when they spread that negativity and nothing is ever good enough and right enough and everything's an issue. They're contributing to the problem and not to the solution. You have to be willing, if there is that person on your team, to take the steps to confront them, to create that action plan, to document it, and then to allow them to find a place where they are better suited for the sake of your team. Because if not, you run the risk of losing the rest of your team to either negativity and being just as unpleasant and toxic as they are, or they're going to go. Dan has a great sense of humor. I wouldn't go that far, but I would say that sometimes they're just not a good fit. Let's move them on to a company where they are a better fit, or transfer them to the competition so they can struggle with what you have, the problems you're having. Just joking. Don't do that. But be willing to say, okay, we've done everything we can. Let's move on, and to do it sooner rather than later. And if I were to go to another poll and to ask you, okay, how many of you have someone in mind? When I said the internal pessimist, you had someone pop into your head immediately. I'm seeing some hands being raised already. Yep, that person, that person, that person. Move on. Coach them, talk to them, or move them out. So final thoughts on how to transfer your culture from toxic to terrific is one, identify the source of that toxicity. Is it negativity? Is it a person? Is it an organizational change? Is it your leadership style? Examine your role in creating that negativity and then don't avoid it. Take action for it. The action may be something as simple as conversations and discussions, having that open forum. We offer a wide variety of tools from team dynamic analysis to on-site training to employee surveys. Maybe you're thinking my employees aren't ever going to tell me what's really wrong with my organization. Omnia can help with that. We are a behavioral-based assessment company with 30 years of experience. I want to encourage you that a toxic environment is not something that you have to live with. You have the opportunity to change it. Is it going to take work? Absolutely. Is it worth it? Definitely. Is it needed? Without a doubt. So I want to go ahead and open it up for any questions that anyone may have. One of the questions, go ahead and type them in the chat box if you have any questions. One of the questions I'm always asked is, how do you really find out what your employees are looking for when you feel like there's some toxic environment going on? Have those one-on-one conversations. Ask for some, you can conduct anonymous employee surveys, but really it all starts with that conversation of being self-aware. Maybe it is something that you're creating, asking for feedback, asking for assistance, and then also talk about what are their next steps? Where would you like to go? Okay. So we have a question. How do you deal with a manager who's always punishing employees? I think the first step is to really have that manager understand what their leadership style is and how that's very different. There are some leadership styles, communication style, for example, that where people are very analytical and they're problem solvers. So their natural tendency is to only recognize when there's an issue. They kind of live by this statement, if you have a job, then you're good, or you don't hear, no news from me is good news. Knowing your team, knowing what motivates them is key. I manage our client advisor um, team here, and when I first took over, I talked with all of them, and I said, "Hey, what's one thing you want me to know that would help me successfully manage you?" And one person said, "If you ever need me, please, please, please don't ever say come over to my office without telling me why. It automatically stresses me out. I think the worst for me." As a leader and as a person, that would never dawned on me. I'm just like, hey, come over here for a minute. I want to talk to you about a profile. And they're like, okay, yeah, sure. Knowing that about that person was key because I had to adjust my leadership style to be a more effective leader. Another question is, how do you approach someone who's a Debbie Downer to coworkers but excellent to customers? That falls right back into that top performer. That conversation to say, ask her, what's the difference between your internal customers, i.e. your coworkers, and your external customers? She may not be connecting the dots of how they work together and having that conversation of here are some of your strengths. This is what we're seeing well. And then giving some of that coaching, whether it's immediate or during monthly one-on-ones for them. We don't identify those that have a tendency to be toxic. However, we do, which is, thank you, Dan, about the Omnia. We do have some great development tools, though, that will give you some insight into their perspective and intensity. We'll also talk to you about how they communicate. And some people really don't mean to be toxic. They're just so highly attentive to detail that they come across as a blame shifter. That's not their intention. Knowing that as a leader can help you coach them. So we can help with that of knowing what those natural behavioral traits are, what lends to being a little bit more of that toxic person because they're give me the facts and it's not perfect or whoo, everything's great and sunshine and roses and you want something specific from me and you're going to struggle with that a little bit. We can tell you that. The other thing is we have to set some expectation. It goes back to setting those expectations of with your team, of facilitating discussion. You want to avoid, and we talk about this in our conflict resolution webinar, of avoiding the triangle, where instead of the person going to you to talk about an issue, they go to John and Susan and Mike in the office. And now it's created a team of, hey, you're on my side and we've all got to be against the leader or we've all got to be against the person. Create that expectation and that standard of if someone comes to you, your response should be, have you talked to them or have you talked to the manager first? Once that happens, you have to make sure that you understand that now you've given your team a script, you've given them guidelines to say, I don't want to be a part of this. Also, you want to make sure that they have that ability to be very confidential. You're not going to go, hey, Kim told me da 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 da. If it's an issue that you know that other staff have been brought into, then I recommend bringing that weekly meeting together and addressing it at a very high level. Once again, this is what we are expecting. I know this is going around. Here's some information. This is what we're going to do. If you have any questions, come see me. Please, these are great questions. Please keep them coming. Just to let you know as well that if you're wondering how to download the presentation, under takeaways, you're going to see how to transform your workplace, our presentation, as well as some takeaways of ways to cure that workplace negativity and negativity warning signs. Those are free for downloading. We have time for one more question, and I see we have a couple of people typing away, and while you're doing it, I want to thank you once again for coming to our webinar. Make sure you register for our February 11th webinar, Fuel Employee Trust and Engagement with Authentic Communication. If you're wondering, hey Kim, got some questions, can I talk to you online about this team dynamics? One of the things I've done with some of our clients is we come on site, we do some training, we talk about Omnia, we talk about the differences between the team, but we also have discussions with employees if you're afraid that they're not going to talk with you, and then we give feedback to senior leadership. Give me a call. My phone number and my email is available. Keywords, not toxic. Love that. So putting that ad up front, talk clearly about your culture. We're looking for something that's fast-paced, collaborative. Most people in an ad talk about the job, talk about the culture. We're fun-loving, work as a team, enjoy, quarterly outings, whatever it may be. That will begin to paint a picture and allow people to say, do I want to be a part of it or not a part of it? Upbeat. It could be something also as simple as if you've got that driven environment. We want aggressive go-getters. You're comfortable in a high-pressure organization. Once again, it's setting that expectation and talking about the culture, not necessarily talking about the job as much. I want to say thank you so much for all of your questions and your participation. As always, it is a joy to conduct these webinars. Join us again next month as we talk about Fuel Employee Trust and Engagement. There's a link at the top that you can click on to go ahead and register. My name is Kim Bussey, and on behalf of Omnia, thank you for joining us, and I look forward to talking with you next month. Thank you.